Hello, friends, to our program, My Pathway to Jesus. Today with us we have Andre. Andre, hello.
Hi, Dima.
Andre, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm from Cleveland. I work as a nurse. And I guess the most important thing is that I became a Christian this year, earlier this March. Been
Awesome.
an atheist my entire adult life. Oh,
You've been an
praise God.
atheist your entire adult life?
Yeah, I wasn't planning on doing this morning. My friend Philip recommended that I do it. I said, hey, of all people, I mean, you might move some people to Christ if you...
Do you mind me asking how old you are?
I'm almost 29.
29.
So,
Wow.
entire adult life, practically.
Entire adult life you've been an atheist.
Yep.
Andre, can you tell us your pathway, how you became to find Jesus in your life, and how did you change your path?
Sure. I think it'd be better if I start with how I became an atheist and had my apostasy. I think I was in 10th or 11th grade. I was in biology, and I just, with the power of the internet, you're exposed to anything. And I think it was a scientific rejection at first. Bible didn't make empirical sense to me. I thought that, it didn't match up with the worldview that I was being taught. And I kept it secret. It was one of those things where you're in a Slavic community and you're this black sheep and there's no one else to relate to. And I think as a mechanism for myself, just psychologically, I turned it from, once it was revealed, instead of being ashamed of it, I used it and I told myself, you know what, this is my identity. So in a way, I started cramming in all this knowledge to prove myself right. And over time, I still attended church. I still had my family and friends, and thank God for that, because I've heard stories of people who, they really had a falling out with their family, their church, they lost their community. Praise God that I had that, and I was always able to attend. So I've been attending church sporadically, but I would never, kind of just there, more so from an invitation. Sometimes my friend would drag me to conferences, and I would say the last one was in 2018 in Massachusetts. And just to contrast the difference, at the end of the conferences, they would ask for text messages. I was the one who sent one where they displayed it on the screen, and I forgot what exactly it was, but I do remember one of the pastors was like, "Whoever sent this, speak to me after. You're in a really dark place. I'm not going to be able to answer you here." So time passed, and...
Did you end up speaking to him?
I did. He gave me a book, William Lane Craig, Reasonable Faith. And I really appreciated it, and it gave me a new light on things. And I think in that moment, around that time, I was having a nihilistic phase. I read Yuval Noah Harari. It was a passage that I clearly remember that said, everything's meaningless. And you just go through this deep depression where, everything that you can achieve, there's no meaning behind it. It's similar to not having food. It's one of those things that you need as a human being. And I think we have an epidemic of lack of meaning in our culture today. So I found a group that had similar views. It was a Slavic ex-Christian group, and I thought I found a community. And I thought, these are the rational people. These people get it. And it was anonymous. It was nationwide. And I contacted this person, and I thought, okay, I could relate. But I think what happened was, as time went on, I don't know, the world started to change. In 2020, we had everything kind of falling apart. And all these people that I thought were rational started saying the most irrational things. It made me remember the phrase, without God, anything is permissible. And I always used to laugh at that. I used to say, no way, we're rational now. We're not living in the dark ages anymore. And yet these very same people can turn something around so quickly and say, of course, yeah, man and woman is not an objective truth. It's whatever you want it to be. And I was just, I realized, I'm like, wait a second, I have no grounds to say that. Like if I look at, psychology or, biology, it's like, who makes that distinction, right? So then I just saw, how things were falling apart. I started reading history, and I started to look into the history of Christianity, and I'm like, wow, they're sounding more rational now. And maybe it was my upbringing, I grew up in a Christian household, and Christian values were instilled into me from when I was young. And I'm very thankful for that. And it was a roundabout path that I had to take, but it started this turnaround, I would say, in 2020 for me. The other thing that has always been there is I'm a nurse. I've been doing this for almost 6 years, so I've dealt with death. It's one of those intangibles that you don't write on a resume, that you don't sign up for. You're like, I'm going to learn all the medicines and everything, but it's one of those things that really hit me. And you see people at the end of their life, especially during COVID, they're alone, and you realize that no one's asking for the degree, their pay stubs or anything like that. It's not the head surgeon that walks in that lightens the air, it's the chaplain. anytime the chaplain came in, it just, something felt right. Even the non-believers, they would never say, oh, don't send the chaplain in. Why not?
They would never say no to him.
No, they would always invite them in. And it's funny, is I worked at Cleveland Clinic, and they have a chaplain for like every religion, right? Whatever your denomination or whatever worldview is, they'll have one. And my friend jokingly said, do they have one for atheists? Where, they come up and quote Nietzsche, or, like, oh, there's nothing but a, black void after. No one would ever say that, right? But like on paper they say that, but at the end of life, they don't. And, it really struck me. I had a patient once where, they were asking me, this isn't for everyone, not everyone has this opportunity, but they would ask me, hey, can you write down these hymns, before I go so that they could sing them at my funeral? And I'm like, wow, I was just blown away by that, And my thought was always, we say things all the time, like they're just chemical reactions, right? They're not anything objective. And I thought, wait a second, how can I say that I love something, right? Or I appreciate something, or something is beautiful, when in the background I can just say, oh wait, no, these are just chemical reactions, right? Like when you actually realize that, can you really say you love something? Because the moment you, ground that in chemical reactions, it's meaningless. It's kind of like we draw sentimentality from objects, not based on their physical nature, but just their association. So for example, a chair or a lamp or some book or some object, is ordinary, but you value it based on, hey, this was my grandmother's, right? And same thing with art. You could look at art, and if you think you're looking at a Mona Lisa, and then you find an exact replica molecule for molecule, and they say, hey, it's not the real one, all of a sudden it's the same thing, but you don't value it as much. And I thought, if we don't have objective beauty, if we don't have objective morals, we could just make anything up. It's like the Matrix. And the world just did not make sense to me. And I started to question all these atheistic philosophers that I was listening to. And what's funny is the way that I used to look at Christianity, I used to think, oh, holier than thou, pretentious people. I thought, oh, you guys just think you're morally better than everyone. But no, it's actually the postmodernists who think that. They're the ones that say, no, you need to improve yourself. It's through your works. And Nietzsche critiqued this. He said, you think you're doing something, for the sake of pure altruism, but there's always an underlying motive, right? And it's funny, the Christians realized this, right? They said, anything you do, you can find an underlying motive for it. So if you do something good, even if it's like martyring yourself or being selfless or just even in secret, right? The fact that it's secret, you can even like say, hey, I did it in secret. So, you benefit yourself. So it's always you at the end. And even what's ironic is, the book Richard Dawkins wrote, Selfish Gene, I can actually look at that book now and think, wait a second, like this proves my point, is that you cannot be good for the sake of pure goodness. Like he can even say, anything you do is for the propagation of DNA, like kin selection theory. And I'm like, yeah, how can I say I'm doing anything good? At the end of the day, I can always make the argument that it's for myself, it's for my own pride. And we've seen this experiment happen in the 20th century, and you look at history and you look at what happened in Germany, and Lenin, and Stalin, Trotsky in 1917, Pol Pot, Vietnam, China, and I'm just thinking, I look at society now, and honestly, the Christian worldview makes the most sense to me. And anyway, there's that acknowledgement that kind of got the ball rolling, but that's not the same as knowing God, and I had to say, okay, well, does God exist? And it's funny, as Douglas Murray is a political commentator, gay atheist, but he made a comment and said, I think the world would be better if everyone was a Christian. And I agreed with him. I said, yeah, you know what, these principles and this, you can even look from a secular point of view, like all the statistics say, yeah, people are generally happier. It makes sense. It's, living the way God intended you to live. So started reading into that, and I was just going through book after book, and people would give me books over time. There was one, R.C. Sproul, Holiness of God, that I always used to think, oh no, I need scientific, proof. I need Craig, and don't get me wrong, those are good, but I thought, they're supplementary. They're not going to be like, oh, 2 + 2 is 4, therefore God, right? I thought that approaching God was like a loading bar. It's like, oh, just a little bit more, and I'll be there. No, it's only when I really, by accident, found it, but I had the willingness. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to aggressively approach this. I'm just open to it. So I opened up this book, which I used to think, it's been sitting there for a while, because I read the first few pages a while back. I'm like, this sounds like it's something for people who already believe in God, right? Like, if you're going to argue about like the dimensions of a unicorn horn, right? And I don't even believe in the unicorn. Why would I believe? You have to convince me the unicorn exists. But I'm reading this book, and I'm just blown away by the descriptions of God. And I thought, wow, like that's actually really interesting, because the way I viewed the Old Testament God, for example, like Uzzah, the Levite who touched the ark and was instantly killed, I used to think, oh, wrathful God, like how can a loving, just God, like how can a loving, benevolent God do this? And he explained very well, no, like, if he didn't do that, he wouldn't be consistent, he wouldn't be just. And he knew full well he was from the tribe of, Levi. He was supposed to handle these holy objects. I'm like, that makes a lot more sense viewing it through this different lens of mine. But then later, I was consumed by that. That book was really good. I'm like, you know what? Give me more. So I had Lee Strobel, Case for Christ, that gave me that historical context and a bunch of other scientific stuff. C.S. Lewis, I think, was the practical approach that got the ball rolling for me. And I remember just starting to pray. I'm like, okay, well, here, I'm going to start praying. He says, look, it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be ugly the first time you do it. But, you have to work at this and you have to want it.
What was your first prayer like?
Yeah, so I was laying in my bed. I'm like, oh yeah, I said I'm going to pray tonight. So I'm like, all right, God, well, here we go. And then I'm like, I pause and I think, wait a second, I'm addressing the creator of the universe. I'm going to get on my knees, And I was just compelled to get onto the side of my bed instead of just disrespectfully sitting there. So I did, and it just became a nightly thing that I did. It became more natural, but at the same time, I didn't want it to be this, routine thing that eventually, morphs into something genuine. And I think the way that he said it is, look, it's not going to be, I said my 40th prayer, therefore I'm a Christian. No, it's something that you don't notice until you look back over time. And I think he said the analogy was, don't think about it all the time as if like, am I a Christian yet? Am I a Christian? It's analogous to someone trying to fall asleep, right? Like you don't fall asleep if you constantly think about, am I asleep yet? Am I asleep yet? You just let it happen. And I think that was the thing. I tried to brute force approach God previously with like reason and logic, but God is not an object to be studied empirically, right? Like you could be a geologist and study rocks or a biologist study animals. But if you study a human being, it doesn't matter if you have an army of scientists with accoutrements, their trade. If they're studying a human, they're not going to know anything about that human until that human is willing to open themselves up. And in the same way, God is not going to be like, yes, examine me and, here you go. Like you're not going to have that opportunity. So for me, I think it was when I had the realization that, I'm actually a fallen human being and the sacrifice and the gravity of the sacrifice Jesus made for me. And then I had some personal experiences happen too. I mean, everyone has, different ways of approaching God. There's as many as there are people on earth and have been and will be. But my mom got really sick. And I just remember finding her unconscious in bed. I'm a nurse, so I took her vital signs and, she was fine. But I remember taking her to the hospital in our car. She's in a catatonic state, and my dad and my mom have always asked me to pray with them, and I always refused. And I said, why would I do that? I'm not going to submit to that. I don't believe in it. And here I am asking my dad to pray with me as I'm driving my mom to the hospital, because he's just taking care of her in the back. And he recalled that later and said, it's the timing couldn't have been better with this. I mean, I didn't know. I was the only one in healthcare in my family that, and I even said, I don't know. This is out of my control. I can name you all the receptors and everything, but it means nothing. It's in God's hands and how he works through these doctors and nurses. So that was at least, for me, not just a mental acknowledgement. It was, because you do it with not just your head, but also with your heart. And later, I think once I finally got over the leap of God exists, I can acknowledge that mentally, like intellectually. But I also needed to say, okay, well, how do I move on with loving God with my heart? And at first I was worried that this was an illusion, meaning, am I just doing this for like the interest of it rather than, a genuine feeling? And I remember I thought something was wrong with me because I overanalyze everything. And I just was envious of people who just could simply accept it. I was always stubborn, and I thought, sometimes I really hated the way that my mind worked, that I, just can't simply accept things. And I woke up then, and I was just like, what do I do? What do I read? I'm always like, give me something to solve this. But I took a step back and I said, you know what? It's not about that. I'm just going to pray and I'll ask God. And morning came. One of the people that really have been speaking to me throughout this whole journey for the last few months is Tim Keller. I typed in Tim Keller doubt, and not in the way that like God doesn't exist, but like, do I have a relationship with God? Because like, you can have emotions, but are they genuine, right? Like, are they just sporadic and, I don't want to have to rely on emotions. And I just started to cry when he, went into the Psalms and like how these people felt like God was silent, or Joseph was in jail for so long. And, I realized, no, God works, in silent times. You don't have to feel emotional all the time. You just have to acknowledge the facts, and that Jesus died for you, that God, does exist. And I realized, wow, it's already a huge leap for me that I'm not even doubting that God exists. I look back, I'm like, a year ago, had you told me like, that I wouldn't even doubt that God exists, is he's, as real as your shoes or this chair or anything like that, that's a huge step for me. So essentially where I am right now is, I'm looking to have God work through me, through my experience. I wish, looking back, I'm like, I wish I realized this sooner, but at the same time, this is just the path God took me on in this roundabout path, and who knows where I would have been had I not gone through all that. I think the experiences that I've collected through my doubts over time have really strengthened, my belief, because if I could go through all that and then still come around, and the thing is, people message me, people that have known me, and they're like, oh, wow, Andre the atheist converted, and, I'm not going to reveal anything, but I mean, people that I know that I thought were believers, they're having their doubts too. I mean, they are, but people doubt, and that's very normal. And I'm like, look, I mean, do you believe in God or do you not believe in God? I can direct you better if you are at the state where you don't believe in God, because I could at least rationally tell you, hey, look, if you don't want like pure scientific stuff, you could look at like we have thirst and hunger. Blaise Pascal brought this up, and he said, well, we know that there's material things that could fulfill that desire, but everyone has a God-shaped hole in their heart. And everyone universally throughout all human history tries to fill that hole. But when they try to fill it incorrectly, you have deviations from God's good plan or the way that he created things. So in modern times, you see this reversion to nature, this Gaia worship. So like the earth is mad at us. Look at the astrology or manifest this, the universe is talking to me. And I think that's just a miscalculation of, or misinterpretation of trying to shove something into that God-shaped hole with the wrong thing. But there's also other, reasons that I can get into. But I just think through my experience in totality, the answers are out there. You really just have to open up your heart. You're not going to get through brute force logic. In a way, God, you could search for him, but you have to be found. And I think Ariel Roth, he's a Swiss zoologist. He had this quote, and he said, God doesn't perform miracles for the atheists because his ordinary works are sufficient enough. So I'll end it with that.
Amazing story. Do you, if I may ask, do you believe that you have a truly genuine relationship with God as of today?
Oh, yeah.
Do you believe that you were born again at this point?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm hoping to get baptized soon. I have classes coming up.
Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord.
Yeah, praise the Lord.
What would you say to people that maybe listen to this or are in a similar position to you? What would be just one simple advice that you can give them, if you can summarize it maybe in one sentence or so?
Yeah, so I would say that, there's probably two categories of people. One, do you believe in God? If you don't believe in God, it's the first hurdle you have to get over. If you don't believe in God, you have to get over that hurdle. If you do believe in God, well, you have to acknowledge that what's the most important thing? C.S. Lewis said, okay, God, if God exists, he is, the most important thing. Nothing, comes first. So the analogy I would make is if you already believe just nominally, hey, I have a creator that existed. And if you think about eternity compared to the finite time now, let's make the analogy of how much of this life matters if after the afterlife is, let's say, the difference between a 2-star hotel and a 3-star hotel that you will spend eternity in, right? So if you said, yeah, you're telling me I'll go from a 2 to 3-star hotel for eternity? Oh, I don't care. Like, I don't care about the islands of today. I don't care about anything, of possession, like material possessions, whatever, because at the end of the day, cumulatively after eternity, it's, incomparable, like the finite time that you have here. So I would just say you probably have to rearrange your priorities and what's most important in your life. And I would say, you're just gonna have to open yourself up. Through my experience, brute force did not work. So everyone has a different way to come to it, but you really have to open yourself up.
You have to make yourself discoverable to God.
Yes, exactly.
As I was listening to this, I was just thinking about a very simple analogy that I think most of us would comprehend pretty quickly. It's just like making that Bluetooth connection in your car. Mm-hmm. Your car can be searching for your phone the whole time, but if you don't make yourself discoverable, that's not going to sync up.
Oh, of course, yeah. That's a good one.
Andre,
I'll have to steal that one.
Thank you so much for you being here, for sharing your testimony. And we're glad that even though it took you a while, but you have a genuine relationship with God and you're happy. Oh, yeah. Just hearing your story, I can tell that your soul rejoices.
Thank you. Yeah, if he could use me, he'd use me.
Praise the Lord. dear friends, even in the darkest moments of our life when we might feel like there's nothing to look forward to, when we might feel like everything that we do might seem meaningless, it's not. Seek God. Seek His will in your life, and you will understand what an abundance of blessings it is for each one of us. May the Lord bless you all. See you next time.